Las Flacas. Las Flacas, meaning the skinny girls, emerged in El Salvador during the early 2000s as an all-female extension of the country's gang landscape, dominated by MS-13 and Barrio 18. Unlike the auxiliary roles women often played in male gangs, such as lookouts, smugglers, or couriers, Las Flacas established themselves as a self-contained unit with their own leadership and structure. Their primary activities included extortion, armed robbery, and enforcement operations. They demanded rent from local businesses, a form of protection money that mirrors the practices of their male counterparts. Women in the gang carried out shootings, acted as armed guards at drug stash houses, and organized kidnappings. In some neighborhoods, they directly replaced male cliques that had been dismantled by police crackdowns. The gang's leadership style challenged cultural expectations in a society where women were rarely recognized as crime bosses. Las Flacas developed their reputation by confronting rival gangs head-on, participating in firefights with police, and carrying out killings to establish territorial dominance. Female members gained notoriety for carrying pistols in handbags and rifles under clothing, defying the stereotype of passive roles within organized crime. Authorities noted that the gang used feminine appearances to its advantage. Members could infiltrate areas undetected, pose as ordinary civilians, and bypass suspicion more easily than tattooed male gang members. Once inside targeted zones, they acted decisively, with intimidation reinforced by a willingness to use violence as effectively as their male rivals. Las Flacas demonstrate how women, under extreme social and economic pressures, adapted the structures of existing gangs into their own self-sufficient criminal organization. Their rise blurred the line between auxiliary female groups and full-fledged crime syndicates, reshaping the narrative of gang control in Central America. The Dagger Debs. The Dagger Debs emerged in Los Angeles during the 1970s as the female branch of the Crips, one of the city's most dominant street gangs. While initially attached to the men's organization, they quickly gained recognition as an independent unit with their own hierarchy and street presence. Their existence reflected the spread of gang culture into female groups, particularly in south-central neighborhoods, where violence and territorial battles were daily realities. Their criminal activities mirrored those of their male counterparts: armed robberies, assaults, extortion, and retaliatory attacks against rivals. The Dagger Debs acted as enforcers in disputes, directly participating in shootings and violent confrontations. Their presence made it clear that women were not limited to supporting roles, but could actively shape the outcomes of gang conflicts. Recruitment came largely from local schools and neighborhoods. Young women drawn into the Debs often cited protection, respect, and solidarity as reasons for joining. Once inside, they were expected to demonstrate loyalty through participation in violent acts. Initiation rituals often required assaults or armed confrontations, binding members tightly to the gang's code. The Dagger Debs also used gender to their advantage. Police initially underestimated them, assuming women were less capable of extreme violence. This underestimation allowed the gang to conduct robberies and ambushes with less suspicion than their male allies. Over time, however, law enforcement recognized their role as a serious threat, placing them under the same scrutiny as established male gangs. The legacy of the Dagger Debs lies in how they redefined women's roles in Los Angeles gang culture. Their violence, organizational discipline, and independence from the male Crips structure demonstrated that female gangs could exist not just as auxiliaries, but as feared players in the city's underworld. ISIS. ISIS was an all-female gang that formed on the south side of Chicago during the 1970s, a period when the city's streets were dominated by male-led organizations such as the Black Disciples and the Vice Lords. Unlike most female groups, which operated as auxiliaries or support crews, ISIS built its own reputation as a standalone syndicate with leadership, enforcement, and internal hierarchy. The gang's primary activities included armed robbery, burglary, and street-level drug trafficking. Members carried out coordinated heists against small businesses, often striking in groups to overwhelm targets. They also maintained control over designated blocks, defending their territory with firearms and improvised weapons. In some neighborhoods, ISIS operated with the same authority as the major male gangs. Leadership inside ISIS was structured along strict lines. Senior women directed recruitment, assigned jobs, and enforced discipline with the same severity as their male counterparts. Members who disobeyed orders or showed weakness faced violent punishment, ensuring loyalty and cohesion. This discipline allowed them to grow from small cliques into a syndicate that commanded respect in Chicago's gang network. One of the group's defining characteristics was its use of femininity as a tactical advantage. Members often lured robbery victims or rival gang members into ambushes, exploiting the fact that women were less likely to be suspected of violent intent. Once their targets were isolated, the attacks were swift and brutal. By the 1980s, pressure from law enforcement and rising violence within Chicago's gang landscape forced ISIS into decline. Many members were absorbed into larger, male-dominated organizations, while others faced long prison sentences. Despite this, the gang remains historically significant as one of the few all-female groups to operate with complete autonomy in a city where organized crime was overwhelmingly controlled by men. The 40 Elephants. The 40 Elephants formed an all-female theft network based around London's Elephant and Castle district and operated from at least the 1870s into the mid-20th century, using refined dress and polite manners to move unnoticed through high-end West End stores. Their approach exploited Victorian shop culture, where women customers were granted privacy and deference, allowing teams to enter, distract staff, and exit with valuables before suspicion formed. Leadership shifted from early organizers like Mary Carr to the gang's most famous boss, Alice Diamond Annie Diamond, who imposed strict hierarchy, assigned targets, and enforced discipline with absolute authority, turning scattered shoplifters into a coordinated enterprise with dozens of identified members in the interwar years. Her hard-edged reputation, reportedly reinforced by the diamond rings she wore as makeshift knuckle dusters, signaled internal control and external intimidation. Their core method was technical and planned. Tailor-made garments hid contraband in bodices, hems and sleeves. Fashionable bustles and trims served as concealed compartments for bolts of silk, jewelry, and other luxury goods. Teams blended into crowds, rotated roles between distractors and lifters, and used rail tickets and, later, cars to move stolen stock quickly out of central London before stores could react. The gang monetized theft through a layered resale system known as fencing. Cheaper goods moved through street traders, jewelry went to pawnbrokers, and high-end apparel was relabeled and resold through complicit shops. By taxing or coercing smaller crews working the city, the 40 Elephants acted as regulators of a black market supply chain, extending control beyond individual jobs to the broader underground economy. Fencing means converting stolen goods to cash via intermediaries who disguise origin and value. Law enforcement pressure intensified in the 1920s. Alice Diamond's 1925 arrest was trumpeted as the gang's end, yet family and neighborhood ties kept elements active into the post-war era, illustrating organizational resilience even as newspapers sensationalized details. Stripping exaggeration from press coverage, the verified constants are disciplined leadership, specialized clothing engineering, fast logistics, and a resale network robust enough to sustain one of history's longest-running female criminal syndicates, the Pink Panthers. The Pink Panthers are a loosely organized network of jewel thieves originating from the Balkans, with membership spanning across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Although the group is mixed gender, their female operatives became especially notorious for their precision, boldness, and ability to outwit international law enforcement. The name Pink Panthers was given by Interpol after one of their robberies mirrored a scene from the film series, where a diamond was hidden in a jar of face cream. Their criminal activities centered on high-value jewel heists. Female members often played key roles in planning and executing robberies, exploiting stereotypes that women were less likely to be suspected of masterminding violent thefts. Disguised as wealthy shoppers, models, or tourists, they entered luxury boutiques, assessed security, and struck with carefully choreographed speed. In many cases, entire jobs were completed in under 2 minutes. One documented tactic involved female members scouting targets days in advance, memorizing staff routines, and identifying blind spots in surveillance systems. When the actual robbery occurred, they distracted clerks with requests to view expensive jewelry, while armed accomplices stormed in to smash display cases. Their ability to blend glamour with violence made them uniquely effective in environments where appearance created a false sense of security. The scope of their operations was global. Heists attributed to the Pink Panthers took place in London, Tokyo, Dubai, and Paris, with stolen goods valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Female operatives frequently acted as couriers, smuggling diamonds across borders using body concealment techniques or false bottom luggage. Interpol has described the Pink Panthers as one of the most successful organized theft rings in modern history. Their use of women in leadership and tactical roles challenged assumptions about gender in high-level crime. Even as arrests fractured parts of the network, their legend endures, fueled by spectacular robberies and the mystique surrounding their most glamorous female members. Las Chatas. Las Chatas, also called Las Goteras, were an all-female gang that operated in Mexico during the early to mid-20th century, primarily focused on smuggling, theft, and contraband trafficking. Their activities thrived in a period of economic hardship, when the border trade between Mexico and the United States created lucrative opportunities for organized groups willing to defy customs authorities. The gang specialized in smuggling goods such as alcohol, clothing, and narcotics. Members used their social invisibility, appearing as ordinary women and mothers, to conceal contraband under layered clothing, in baby carriages, and in household items. Their resourcefulness allowed them to move goods across border checkpoints with lower suspicion than male smugglers, creating a competitive advantage in the black market. Leadership within Las Chatas was centered on matriarchal figures who coordinated smuggling routes and managed profits. Senior members oversaw recruitment of younger women from poor neighborhoods, offering them income in exchange for loyalty and risk-taking. This generational structure ensured continuity and transformed the gang into a recognizable female-led network in Mexican organized crime. The cultural significance of Las Chatas was substantial. In a society dominated by male cartels and smuggling rings, their presence challenged assumptions about gender roles in criminal enterprise. By relying on secrecy, femininity, and community ties, they carved out a distinct niche that sustained them for decades. Law enforcement eventually cracked down on the group as smuggling laws tightened, and male-led cartels expanded into narcotics with far greater violence. Many members were absorbed into or displaced by larger organizations. Still, Las Chatas are remembered as one of Mexico's first notable all-female crime syndicates, whose strategies reflected both ingenuity and the limitations women faced in a male-dominated underworld. The Black Widows of Chechnya. The Black Widows of Chechnya were an all-female militant faction that emerged during the Chechen Wars against Russia in the 1990s and early 2000s. Unlike traditional criminal gangs that profited from theft or extortion, the Black Widows organized around politically driven violence, specializing in suicide bombings and hostage operations. The group's name came from its membership base. Many were women whose husbands, brothers, or sons had been killed in the conflict, leading them to embrace martyrdom as both revenge and strategy. Their operations targeted high-profile civilian and military sites. Female members carried out suicide bombings in Moscow subways, airports, and concert halls. One of the most notorious incidents was the 2002 Moscow theater hostage crisis, where heavily armed Black Widows took part in seizing more than 800 hostages. In 2004, they were also linked to the Beslan school siege, where hundreds of children and adults were killed. Recruitment combined ideology, trauma, and coercion. Some women joined willingly after experiencing the loss of family in the conflict, while others were pressured or manipulated by male commanders. Regardless of the method, their presence in frontline terrorist attacks created both psychological shock and tactical advantage, as female operatives were less likely to be suspected at checkpoints and could blend in before striking. The Black Widows became a symbol of fear, not only because of the destruction they caused, but also because they represented the breakdown of traditional gender roles in warfare. Their willingness to die for their cause challenged conventional understandings of female participation in violent movements. Russian counterterrorism forces placed them among the most dangerous threats of the era, given their unpredictability and the devastation caused by their attacks. The group's legacy highlights how women, under conditions of war and loss, transformed into central actors in one of the most violent insurgencies of modern times. Their existence blurred the boundary between organized crime, terrorism, and gendered resistance, making them among the most feared all-female organizations in recent history. Thanks for sticking around. If you want more untold, insane true crime story, tap the next video.